Hello, my unraveled friends. It's super good to see everybody. We need to talk because wow, there was a lot today. Um, Keep in mind, okay, I returned to my job um as a nurse today. I had taken a somewhat of a hiatus. I didn't realize that a case was going to arise that I was going to be so invested in. And so here I am at work, just in between during like prep times and lunch times, and just whenever I could get a chance, sneaking in an AirPod and taking just frantic notes during the trial today. And so that's why I'm here. I wanted to give you guys an update. I literally filled up an entire we have reps who come in and give us pads, and I stole one because I left my notebook at home today and just completely filled this pad up. I am going to do my absolute best just to kind of give you guys an overview of what happened today. There's a lot. It was a lot. There were so many witnesses. First witness that we had on the stand was DCI Special Agent Turbet. Okay. So he came in, and basically the reason that he was on the stand was that he was responsible for interviews with Karina and, turns out, our friend Houston Denker as well. Now, he did 2 interviews. No. I'm sorry. He did a follow-up interview with Karina in 2023, I think, when they were starting to get a little bit more hot on that trail. He did, however, interview Houston Denker in 2021 after the incident, and then also he was the detective that interviewed him in 2023 before these arrests were made. So just to really quickly walk through, his interview with Karina was a little bit more of the same, and it wasn't in any formal setting. He had gone to the house. He had just kind of shown up there to speak with her. I believe Aaron was present, and she had wanted Aaron to stay with her during this interview, but I don't think he stuck around. So Special Agent Turbet started talking to Karina and just kind of had her recall everything again. And it was kind of more walkthroughs of the same events. She also even mentioned, I believe, like her child's change in the sleeping arrangements. I believe that was brought up. I believe the loud noise was brought up. Now, however, that is something that changed. Now, Karina was saying in this 2023 interview that she believed the loud noise that woke her up was the screen door that would sometimes not close all the way, and so the wind would. So anyway, that was a slight change that I noticed. He started talking to her about, was there any contention? And Karina would maintain throughout, this interview with DCI Special Agent Turbet that, like they would tease each other and like pick on each other and stuff, but nothing that she would ever really categorize as an argument. But she did concede to the fact that when asked, that there would sometimes be a little bit of contention regarding finances, but that she and Ryan really didn't have much debt other than like both of their vehicles, which I think that she said in this interview totaled, less than $25,000 worth of debt. There wasn't a great deal of financial hardship, according to Karina during that interview. So when she brought up this occasional financial, these little tiffs they would get in, she would kind of characterize them as just not arguments per se, but just, that this was an issue occasionally, as it is, right? Literally in every marriage, finances is a thing. We know this. But Special Agent Turbet kind of dug in a little bit more with that line of questioning when she brought it up. And he, said that at that time she started mentioning, there was a point in time where like he was questioning that like I was making purchases, and I always felt like I kind of had to check in with him or sort of get permission before I would make purchases on the credit card or purchases in general. And he did state that throughout that interview, she did express that she wasn't a fan of feeling like she had to do that in their marriage. Yeah. So, then we get to a point where he brings up Houston Denker. of course, because at this point they've learned a little bit more about that and all of those goings ons. Goings. Yeah. Okay, we're going with that. And she had said that their friendship had formed while he was a client. She would cut his hair. And then they started forming just sort of a friendship via text and Snapchat, and that she would, occasionally watch his kids. He was a single father, that kind of thing. But that her last communication with Houston Danker was just maybe a few months after Ryan's death, and really nothing since then. I believe they even said that like fall of 2021. Now, what I want to address is there was some, I guess, speculation that the relationship continued between Houston and Karina after Ryan's death. It turns out what they're saying in court, and I want to be clear, what they're saying in court as of now, what the testimony has been, and this may change and other people might come on and say different things. We don't know yet. But the testimony so far has been that the relationship actually did not continue. And that was just speculation and rumor, maybe. As of today, it appears that they did actually end their relationship. Over what, we're not sure yet. I also did watch a little snippet on Court TV last night. And as of right now, again, nothing is said in fact, but what Court TV is saying is Houston Danker will not be testifying against Karina. And even they went so far to say last night, some, legal analysts were saying that it's highly unlikely that Karina will take the stand and testify on her own behalf. That's not to say that defense is not going to present a case. It's just saying that as of right now, it's not likely that Karina will take the stand. And so that's where we are with that. But I did just want to kind of throw in that edit, because I do remember even having a conversation over the weekend about, whether their affair continued after it. But as of right now, according to testimony, it actually doesn't look like that was the case. And I just want to try to be as accurate as possible. Again, so much of this case is based off of testimony, text and all of this circumstantial stuff, and we'll keep watching and we'll see if there's any changes there, any new information that we just as a public don't have yet. We'll see how that unfolds. She did get questioned about the Snapchat communications between her and Houston, and she classified this as like just light Snapchat usage, nothing personal, nothing of an intimate nature whatsoever. And during this interview, Special Agent Turbet even said, like, do you think that Houston had something to do with this, or have you ever thought about that? And she said, well, of course I've thought about it. I've wondered about it because everyone in the town is speculating about this and saying that maybe that was a possibility, which just, goes back to that whole small town thing. With the rumors and the speculation. But I just found it interesting how she played into that as like, oh, don't mind that. It doesn't mean anything. It's just small town gossip, But then Special Agent also asked her, like, has Ryan ever accused you of, having an affair? Was there any concern on his part that you were having an affair? And she adamantly said, no, absolutely not. There was never a reason for him to think that that was something I would do, nor was there ever a reason for me to believe that that was something he would do. And then the detective kind of throws in this thing about geolocation. And I know that this was a tactic, obviously, even I think the defense in their cross mentioned it and said, like, this was a lie, right? And the special agent kind of confirmed, he's like, well, we're allowed to say things like this. And what he was referring to was the geolocation and what they call geofencing, basically meaning that they can draw a block around an area and gather data on like whether anybody's cell phone, like whose cell phone, if there were any persons of interest, was in that vicinity, that block, like that fence. And he did this as a tactic because he at this point, they did believe that there was something fishy going on. And that, that is something that I've noticed that detectives and investigators will do, to try to get people to, like, we already know everything, so you might as well tell us. It's that kind of thing to kind of get them to open up and say, well, I'm I'm kind of screwed. I might as well spill the beans. But she didn't react to that. He said that she kind of just like, oh yeah, sure. Okay, sure. But as he kept pressing the issue a little bit more, because questions obviously at this point do become a little bit more pointed and a little bit more confrontational, because at this point they are trying to get to the bottom of what happened, and they're trying to make sure that they get justice for Ryan. That's what this is about. And at that point, he said that Karina became very agitated at his more pointed and confrontational questions, and that she said, you know, I see what you're doing. You're accusing me. And immediately said something along the lines of, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but said something along the lines of like, trust me, don't you think if I knew who did this, I'd be in jail already because I would have killed that MFer, was her response. And then after that, she very quickly told the special agent to get off her property and that she was going to hire a private investigator to get to the bottom of this. So that was where we left off with him. Now, that was the morning break. So upon returning from the morning break, they knew that there was more testimony from this special agent. And so outside of jury presence, defense actually brought up an objection. And they were saying how the Houston Danker interview from 2021, the night of, was fine to play, but that in the Houston Danker interview of 2023 was not okay to play. They wanted that out. They were like, we feel like it's just hearsay at that point, because if there was a conspiracy, at that point it had ended. And state got up in front of the judge and was like, absolutely not. Conspiracy can carry over to concealment. And so anything that Houston Danker said, even in 2023, could still be considered part of the conspiracy. Maybe not the conspiracy to murder Ryan Cooper at that point, but the conspiracy to continue to conceal what they had done. And so they wanted that interview footage to be played. The judge says at first, like, well, we can take this on a statement by statement basis, because obviously if the conspiracy continues even years later by a co-defendant, this is not hearsay. This is evidence, what he's saying. Anyway, judge ended up ruling that the interviews could be played, and that if the state had an objection throughout based on any specific statement that was being made, they could raise that at the time. So what do we get? We get back from the morning break, and he starts talking about the 2021 Houston interview. We thought we were going to get a video at first, and guess what? Nope. Because it's always technical difficulties. There's always technical difficulties. And so we didn't get that right away. Now, we did get it later. Eventually they figured out, I think even a couple more witnesses were called before they actually went back and played that. So just for consistency, I'm not going to go to the other witnesses. I'm just going to tell you what was shown in Houston Danker's interrogation footage, kind of wrapped up into a tight little bow. Basically, same thing as Karina, asking him about their Snapchat communication, saying that, you know, no communication really other than outside of his hair appointments or her helping with his kids. That's it. He actually referred to himself during this interview as something along the lines of Karina's gay best friend. That, in his opinion, summed up their relationship, you know? Platonic, like a gay bestie. Like, hey girl, now Houston. Anyway, and maybe this was believable in 2021, you know, but it's just after all the expose that we've had in court about their relationship and how long it actually was going on and how long they had been talking and the nature of their relationship. When we go back and watch these early interviews and hear them describing their relationships with one another, it really just kind of is like, oh my gosh. It literally is just bold-faced, like lying and diminishing and sweeping it completely, like acting like, I don't know, it's just kind of bizarre when you know one thing, but you see someone trying to convince you of something different. It's weird. It's a little surreal. You're just like, anyway, very strong denial throughout this interview that there was any sort of affair whatsoever and that it was all just small town rumor and speculation, right? So anyway, I mean, that pretty much summed it up with that with that 2021 interview. So the next witness that we had on the stand, her name was Kirsty Shetta. Loved her. Longtime Traer resident. She met with law enforcement in 2024. And pretty much told them that she had known Ryan and Karina for anywhere between 8 to 12 years. She met Ryan when she was working at a hardware store. She met Ryan first. Then she met Karina and developed a friendship with her. Once Ryan and Karina were a couple, her and her husband would hang out with them quite often. They had quite a large circle of friends. They were all very close. They hung out frequently. They would travel together, hang out in the shop and just socialize and camp and hunt and snowmobile, all of these things, right? And Kirsty eventually was asked about, just if she noticed any changes in Karina in like the months leading up to Ryan's death. And of course, she said, yes, absolutely. So we had these large group chats on Snapchat just for like different things we would like to do. Like we had a golf chat, or we had a camping chat, or we had, all these different chats that she was a part of. But, in the fall of 2020, she recounts that she noticed that Karina started getting much more distant and started pulling away. And even at one point, just completely removed herself from all of these group chats that she was once a part of. She also recounted multiple times that she would witness Karina having a great deal of anger for Ryan. A lot of statements that she would make, if he ever left me, I will take him for everything that he has. Kirsty said that she just used to belittle him a lot, both in front of him and behind his back, and said that at one point she used to even kind of feel like she was digging at her a little bit because she used to work with Ryan. And when Karina would get upset about something, she would be like, what, I don't know, maybe you should ask your work wife. So kind of those little undertones of maybe a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of, that kind of mean girl vibe, she would get from her on occasion. And then she said that again, she would notice quite a bit of resentment very often in their relationship, primarily focused around financial problems. She said that at one point she was even in a place with Karina where Houston in 2020 showed up at a place where they were with Karina, I guess trying to talk to Karina. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that part. But then Kirsty does go on to say that she herself personally saw, this was shortly after that, saw Snapchats from or between Houston and Karina, but that she never confronted her about it. And then she said it was funny because, in fact, a couple of days later, Karina messaged me and said, can you believe these freaking rumors about Houston and me? Like, can you even believe the audacity of what these people are saying? Kirsty said she never admitted to it, but that she was pretty sure that it was sometime around the spring of 2021 that Ryan Cooper became aware of the affair. And he, as we know, was killed in early summer, right before summer of 2021. Now, she was also asked about Karina's knowledge of firearms. This was a very common theme today. Everybody wanted to know what Karina's friends and close members of her community knew about her knowledge of firearms. Kirsty said very plainly and clearly she was very familiar with firearms. In fact, now, again, I was at work. I was trying to jot down notes. I can't remember if she said they were at a range or that Kirsty had bought a gun, because like I said, there was a lot of talk about this amongst all of the witnesses today. So I may be getting my stories mixed up. So please forgive me if that's the case. But the gist of it all is the same. Every witness kind of said the same. Karina had a very strong understanding of firearms, and that Kirsty said that she was very well aware of how to shoot a 22. Specifically, I remember those words, that the 22 caliber weapon, it was very specifically something known that Kirsty had seen her do or had known that she was able to do, which, is just, there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of women who have concealed carry permits and who go to the gun range and there's nothing wrong with that. However, what there is something wrong with is portraying yourself even immediately and voluntarily, like without any questioning about it, making yourself seem like you have absolutely no knowledge of how to work a gun or what a gunshot would sound like. Not just one, but two, okay? Ryan was shot twice in the face, and Karina just keeps relating like a noise to a screen door or a tension rack falling in her bathroom. And I just I'm really struggling with this point because I know that she knows what gunshots sound like. And if two went off in her home while she was in bed, I feel like she wouldn't have thought it was the screen door slamming. I don't know. This is just personal to me. I'm just struggling with I'm just banging everything. I'm just struggling with the noise that woke her up, which is never plural. It's just one thing, although one thing changed into another. And then the fact that she, like during her first police interview, and she was like, I went into my room and I tried to get this gun, which I've never shot, by the way. I don't even know how to use it. Like, it was the way that she threw it. It still is just bugging me when very clearly every single witness today was asked about her knowledge of firearms. And she had a decent, I don't know how extensive, but she was familiar. She was familiar. Cross-examination got on with Kirsty and just kind of confirmed that Kirsty herself had never heard any threats of physical harm come from Karina and had never seen her act physically violent towards Ryan. It was all just anger, like yelling, verbal, that kind of thing. And then defense actually did a thing that was defense today. I have not been impressed with them so far. But remember those searches that Karina, this was in her Google searches. Maybe I didn't mention this on the live that we did, but one of Karina's Google searches that they went over, I think on either Wednesday or Thursday of last week, that prosecution was using as a suspicious thing, was that Karina was on this website, Hunter Ed, and she was searching different guns, different bullets, what those bullets would be good for killing, like what kind of bullets were good for what kind of game or animal or whatever. Defense did at least come on and say, weren't you guys getting your concealed weapons permit together? And Kirsty was like, yes. And she was like, isn't that something you have to study for? Don't you have to have some sort of knowledge about guns and bullets and things like that? And Kirsty said, yes. And that was it. But I knew they were like, so is it possible that Karina was doing research before you guys took, your test? And she was like, of course. So I knew immediately what they were trying to tie that to. Yeah, that was the first actual time today that I was like, okay, I can see that. I can see that being a thing that someone would do. But that was the first time. And we've been in trial for like 3 days. But anyway, that's not my business. That's not my defense attorney. It's hers. Okay, so next up on the stand, we have a woman by the name of Carmen Earhart. Now, I've gotten multiple messages from people in this community saying that, like, this was a big one. They were close. Carmen was a Traer resident, longtime Traer resident. And she was, I need a mount. I'm terrible at YouTubing. Carmen was a very close personal friend, very just locked in. Okay. And again, she expressed even that in the months leading up to Ryan's death, that they had kind of fallen out, that Karina had withdrawn and wasn't as present, and, that they had just kind of, things were changing, things weren't different. She couldn't really put her finger on why. But again, her testimony was much of the same. What prosecution was trying to get at with this slew of personal witnesses today was these people that were close to them witnessed very frequently a lot of hostility and anger towards Ryan, both in front of him and outside of his presence. And that she could be extremely mean to him or when talking about him. That it was always very visible when she was upset, and that very frequently these arguments would arise from the conversation of like financial stuff. So we can clearly see what prosecution is trying to paint today, and we'll get there eventually. It all leads into that. Carmen said that Ryan and her husband, or was it her husband or was it her boyfriend, long partner? I can't, again, I'm really sorry. I was trying to work and write and listen all at the same time. It was so hard today. I wish I could just sit at home every day and watch trials. That's the dream. Ryan called her partner at some point again in the late spring of 2021, was venting about having become aware of this, what they were classifying as an affair between Houston and Karina. And unfortunately, Carmen did reiterate the same thing that we had heard from Kirsty, is that her friends really didn't confront her about this. And then prosecution asks her along the same line of questioning about her knowledge of firearms. And then Carmen, of course, confirms that Karina had a very solid knowledge of firearms, in my personal opinion, despite the act that she put on and that she portrayed to police. So this is when they actually, once Carmen was released from her subpoena, this is when they actually played the Houston Dinker interview. So we did get to see it. This was of the night of, or the day of, this was shortly after the incident. And detectives actually do mention the affair to Houston right away. And of course, same as Karina, very adamantly denies that they were anything ever, more than just friends. And investigators kind of play the same card with the, we have all this technology, right? That's going to show us where you were, who you were talking to, what you were searching for, all of this stuff, right? And they're telling this to Houston. And during the interview, he's just like, yeah, totally, for sure, yeah. Makes sense. Absolutely. But it's just kind of interesting to think about, hence the Google panic after Ryan's death, when on Thursday, prosecution was revealing all of Houston Dinker searches. And he was like, can Snapchats be recovered by forensics? Can this, can that? He went into straight panic mode. And I have to believe it was right after this interview that happened. I'm sure the dates are there during the testimony. I would just have to go back and be a little bit more meticulous in my data gathering. But for now, yes. Hence the Google search panic by Houston Dinker, later revealed in trial. He just goes on to say during that interview that he was in bed by 11 p.m. And it was kind of interesting that the detective, or the investigator, I think it was DCI Special Agent Turbet, that was performing this interview, and he says, so yeah, are you seeing anyone? And Houston was just like, no, I'm not seeing anyone, it's too much drama with my baby mama and this and that, that kind of thing. So again, just interesting to look back, knowing what we know now, that hindsight thing that we all have. It's interesting. Next up, we had another friend of the couple. His name was Leroy Bradley. He said he was very, very close with Ryan. Was this the one? Okay, no, this wasn't the one. Anyway, they continue talking to Leroy, again, confirming all of the firearms stuff, confirming that when Karina would drink, she would get angry. She would be very loud. She would be very hateful. She would be very, mean girl. It was very frequently about this affair allegation. It was very frequently about the money, the credit cards, but that she would get very irate, and that she would very frequently, in front of their friends, verbally attack Ryan. And prosecutors also made it a point to ask each one of these witnesses what Ryan's response would be to Karina's anger. And not very frequently, each witness would say the exact same thing. Ryan was so non-confrontational. He would get quiet. He would withdraw. He would not want to engage. That's just not who he was. He was not an angry, upset, he just, I don't know, it makes me sad. Next up, we had a witness. Her name was Teresa McBride. Again, in that friend circle, outings, traveling, camping, snowmobiling, all of that stuff. And she, again, was on the stand to reiterate the fact that Ryan would not give any engagement when Karina would fly off the handle, that he was very non-confrontational. And when asked to describe Ryan, to the court, she said he would literally give you the shirt off his back. I know it was. I know that's like a cliche thing that we hear people say, but when I hear these people talk about Ryan, when I hear his community and his friends and his loved ones talk about him, it's something I genuinely believe about this man, that he would just take it off. If you needed it, here it is. Like, it's yours. I genuinely believe that about this human being. Teresa goes on to talk about that she did also hear rumors of the affair. She did also see behavioral changes in Karina in the months leading up to Ryan's death. And then she did also recite the same things that the other personal witnesses were talking about, just about her yelling and her anger. She would scream, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you." And she even said, like, she even went so far as to say that it made the entire friend group very uncomfortable when these things would happen. So I have to imagine that this would happen, just the way that she was talking about it, way more frequently than they would like, and that it would make for a very uncomfortable environment when all of this was going down. And again, this is the one that I was waiting for them to bring to the stand, because it turns out that Miss Teresa McBride was one of the witnesses that heard Karina one night in their shop, which the shop was what they called kind of like their hangout spot. He had a bar, he had, it was where all of their friends would gather and socialize and hang out. And during an evening in the shop, Teresa heard Karina yelling, "I hate you. I just want to shoot you in the face." Now, here's the thing. Teresa and one of the witnesses that followed, which I'm getting ready to get into, said that sometimes, couples say things like, "Oh my God, you get on my nerves. Like, sometimes I just want to kill you." And they're just kind of like, "Oh, okay." They're having it, whatever. Both of these witnesses, the second one I will get into next, said that this incident, when they heard her say, "I swear I just want to shoot you in the face," that there was something different about that statement. There was something venomous, and there was something just very disquieting about not only what she said, but the way that she said it. And that's important to know. I mean, these are people who also love her. These are people who love Karina as well. They had a very strong bond with her too, not just Ryan. And so I imagine for them to get on the stand and say these things, it's tough. And I believe them. I believe them. Which brings me to our next witness. His name was Brian Morrison. And this man wholeheartedly just seemed so genuine. Not seemed, I say seemed, his testimony broke my heart. Watching this testimony from start to finish broke my heart. He could very barely keep it together when talking about Ryan being his best friend, but also when talking about Karina. He had a bond with Karina as well. I feel like he had a genuine love for this woman as the wife of his best friend. He loved her. And just while he was speaking about even her, even trying to identify her in the courtroom, when prosecutors say, "Do you see that person in the courtroom today? Can you point them out and tell me just like an article of clothing that they're wearing," right? For purposes of identification. He could barely get that out without that like throat tightening, like that voice shaking. It was heartbreaking. You could tell that this was the absolute last place in the world that this man wanted to be. It kills me. But the significant points of his testimony were, number one, him recalling Ryan getting in the car and saying, "Hey man, listen, I need you to know that if anything ever happens to me, this is where I have put these such and such documents," which I found significant. And again, he went on to confirm all the prior testimony about Karina's anger towards Ryan, her, showing that, even in front of their friend group. This gentleman, Brian, was the second of the two that I had known of. He was the second of the witnesses to testify to Karina, saying he was present at the same time that Teresa McBride was, saying, "I just want to shoot you in the face." And he also just kind of went over that point of it being different than your usual, like, oh my God, you get on my nerves. I swear to God, I could kill you. It wasn't that. He reiterates that point, but he heard her say that. So the next two witnesses that were on the stand were financial witnesses, because again, while we did talk frequently about the firearms during this string of witnesses and her knowledge of them and her use of them, her familiarity with them, there was also a very frequent line of questioning throughout these witnesses about the arguments and the contention that may have existed between Ryan and Karina regarding finances. And so we had two witnesses left. One, his name was Brad Rund. He was a loan officer at their local bank. I can't remember the name of it. I was, again, just kind of jotting down as I could. He was the person who would very frequently call and text about like overdrafts and all these things regarding Karina Cooper's two accounts that she held with him. One was for her shop, like where she did hair and all that stuff, and the other was her personal. You know what? I really have to touch on this though. With the way they were talking, like this girl was getting text messages from this bank manager or this loan officer saying like, hey, we don't want you to go on the negative, but you're on the overdraft list again. And her replies to him would be like, oh shit, sorry. And in my brain, it was just so weird because I live in this huge metropolitan area and I'm like, my bank would never. Nobody in my bank cares if I'm like, it's just so cute to me, this small town dynamic that I'm just like, really? Like they text you like, hey girl, we don't want you to get a fee for this. Maybe you should make a deposit. And you're like, oh shit, my bad. And me, I'm like, my bank doesn't tell me till it's said and done. And if I overdraft, they don't care. It's just a fee that shows up on my bank. Like, I don't know. It's just so cute. I love that small town dynamic. So different from where I live. Anyway, moving on. They went through all of her bank statements for like 6 months leading up to Ryan's death. And let me tell you what the total was. I actually wrote down everything, but let me just get to the totals. So for the shop itself, specifically, for the shop between January and May, overdraft fees. Now, this is not saying the amount that was overdrafted, but this was just overdraft fees. Total was $475 at $25 per transaction, which equals 19 overdrafts between January and May of that year. And then they went into her personal account and I wrote everything down. Again, I could go through all that, but I don't need to. But at the end of it, between January and May, there were over $870 of overdraft fees at $30 per fee. This witness was put on the stand to show that there was a lot of financial irresponsibility and a lot of struggle as far as the finances go on behalf of Karina, and that's why he was there, just basically showing. And he said it was all the time. She was overdrafting constantly, large amounts, and that like a little deposit would be made, but then overdraft, like very frequently. And so that's what they were showing there, that she was spending a lot more than what was coming in, hence maybe the arguments between her and Ryan regarding that. And then the final witness, which by the way, there were eight witnesses. It was insane trying to keep up with all of this today. The final witness that they brought on the stand was the insurance agent. Did I really not write down his name? I'm terrible at this. I'm going to delete my channel now. Anyway, I did write it down. His name was Jeff Gudenkoff. He was an insurance agent and he got on the stand to let us know. Look, see, I'm on it even when I don't know if I'm on it or not. I was on it. So Jeff got on the stand. He was Ryan's insurance agent. He got on the stand to let us know that Ryan had two insurance policies on himself and that Karina, after Ryan's death, was paid out. Checks were cashed. He had two policies on him. One, first check was made out in the amount of $24,724. And two, the second insurance policy on Ryan was paid out and cashed by Karina in the amount of $514,882 for a grand cashed total. She did cash both of these checks, $539,606. And we wrapped it up there. That was it. That's where we left it. Now, we find out, because I think at some point during the trial, I heard all this money was in a trust and that Karina never actually spent a dime. Maybe that's true. And maybe that is going to be defense's cross, or defense's point at some point. But as of right now, all we know is that that money was paid out and that money was cashed out by Karina. What she did with it, I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out in the days to come. Trial will resume tomorrow morning in Iowa at 9 a.m. If you're asking me geographically or like time zone wise, all I know is that 9 o'clock Iowa time is 10 o'clock my time, which is Eastern. So I think Iowa is Central. I'm not sure, but I use Google when I don't know things. And so you guys start watching at 9 a.m. Central, whatever time that is where you actually live. But that was it. I am so sorry that I'm a little bit monotone and kind of draggy, but it was a fun day. But again, my first day back at work for a little while, or after a little while. It was a long one, but it was a fun one. Getting back to work was fun, but also just trying to do that and keep up with this made me a little tired, but I'm going to sleep good tonight. But I didn't want to not give you guys this. So thank you for joining me for it. And I will see you guys again really soon. I'm going to try to do the same thing tomorrow that I did today. I'm going to try to take notes. I'm going to try to keep up with it as much as I can. And I'll have a trial update for you tomorrow evening as well. So until I see you guys again, please, 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 as always, please stay safe, keep asking questions, and keep unraveling. Love you.